This Out and About with Jamie Grout podcast is about the JFK assassination that happened 61 years ago today. We'll be speaking with Newton retired attorney John Billingsley about the research he's done on that. But first, a word from our sponsors, Westside Java Coffee Bar. Check them out. Head on in there for your latte or espresso. They'll take good care of you there. Johnson Aviation at the airport in Newton. They can teach you how to fly, or you can get on a charter plane. They have a brand new charter plane available just for your use if you want to get from point A to point B. The Salvation Army in Newton, where you can sign up for registertoring.com, registertoring.com for the Red Kettle campaign and ring those bells to raise money for the folks who use the services of the Salvation Army. The Pizza Ranch in Newton. Joel Shields, who is a Medicare supplement insurance agent at Interstate Insurance Services. Check him out. The open enrollment period is going on now through December 7th. And Advantage Credit Union.
Let us pay you for checking with us. Hi, this is Leslie with Advantage Credit Union, inviting you to take advantage of Cha-Ching Rewards checking. Earn 3% APY on balances up to $10,000. That's up to $25 per month that ACU pays you. No minimum balance, no monthly fees. Simply do the things you're already doing and cash in at the credit union. Apply online at acuiowa.org or visit us in downtown Newton.
APY is annual percentage yield. Restrictions apply. Federally insured by the NCUA.
When you're listening to this, more than likely, you're listening on the 61st anniversary of the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And with me today is retired Newton attorney John Billingsley, who gave a really good program at my Rotary meeting the other day about the JFK assassination. And John, I was just amazed at the places you've been in terms of the JFK assassination, the things you've seen, the people you've met. But I want to start back, and maybe you could tell us how you had this fascination with the JFK assassination. What was it about you that made you so curious about it and research it and go into it?
Well, I could remember the moment that it was announced to us in the third grade class of Mrs. Chambers in Fort Wayne, Indiana, that the president had been killed and that the school was dismissed and we were all to go home. And I walked home in the rain. And from that moment forward, I became a student of the Kennedy assassination. John F. Kennedy I was 9 at the time, and was among the first people that I thought that I knew that had died. He was, my mother was about the age of Jackie Kennedy, and the president was a little older. And so I was confronted with people that were more or less my parents' age that had died. And it was a first-time experience for me. And ever since then, I have consumed information about the case and about the couple with great interest.
Fascinating. Now, maybe you could tell the listeners about your exploits associated with the JFK assassination down in Dallas. I was amazed at all the places you'd been, the people you'd met, and maybe you could expound on that a little bit, John.
Well, in the years since the assassination, I've been to Dallas several times on trips to learn more about the assassination. And I 3-4 times maybe. And in the course of those trips, I've met witnesses, participants, authors. I've been to the places where the things happened. I've been up in the 6th floor window area
of the Texas Book School Depository.
Yeah, where supposedly the shots were fired.
Uh-huh.
I've been on the grassy knoll. I've been to the picket fence. I've been in the spot in the road where Officer Tippit was gunned down. I sat in the seat in the movie theater where Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested.
Weren't you on the X on the road?
When they dedicated Dealey Plaza as a national historical spot, I was able to find myself standing on the X in the road where the president was located when the fatal shot hit him in the head.
Now, you spoke at Rotary the other day about something that some people know, but not everybody knows, about the magic bullet theory and how something that happened last year or discovery that was made last year may prove that theory wrong?
Well, for 60 years, the evidence has been discussed and debated, and it finally kind of came down to what's called the single bullet theory. And that is, if one of the shots fired by whoever, if it had to go through, it had to hit Kennedy in the back, come out his throat, hit Connally in the back, come out his chest, go through his wrist, and then bury itself in his thigh, eventually working its way onto a stretcher in the hospital where it was discovered, and now is in evidence as Commission Exhibit 399 in the National Archives. And if it didn't happen like that, there was more than one shooter. And people have looked at the single bullet theory in all kinds of ways. Some agree, some disagree, but it's never been ruled out in any way conclusively. And the idea that one person killed Kennedy hangs upon the slender thread of the single bullet theory. About a year ago, a retired Secret Service agent named Paul Landis, I think, came forward and told the world that he found the bullet in the back seat of the limo near where President Kennedy was sitting. He put the bullet in his pocket. He went into the hospital. Eventually, he realized he had evidence in his pocket, so he put the bullet on what he thought was the stretcher of President Kennedy, so it would enter into the stream of evidence for the case. Well, then later they figured out it was actually found on Connally's stretcher, and that flummoxed everybody. But 1 year ago in September, it turns out that the single bullet maybe got walked into the hospital rather than being fired. If that's true, it completely undoes the single bullet theory and undoes any notion that only one person did the shooting.
Now, wasn't there a guy who was hit by concrete or something to that effect that was at the triple overpass?
Yeah, he was kind of across the street, and I'll think of his name eventually. But a bullet hit the curb in front of him, chipped the concrete, flew up, and he had some blood on his cheek. He was standing there watching it from across the way. And so that's yet another bullet that has to be accounted for. And it may be once they figured out there was a ricochet off the curb, then they had to attribute more damage to another bullet going through both guys.
From what I understand, there were a lot of missteps in the whole investigation of JFK. Let's go back to Parkland Hospital where he was taken. And from what I hear, it was supposed to have been an autopsy done locally, but that's not how it turned out, right?
Well, it was a Texas homicide case. The police with jurisdiction were the Dallas police, the Dallas sheriff, and the Dallas district attorney. And they were the ones who were required to do any autopsy or anything of that nature. But the federal agents wanted to take the body back to Washington. Really, they had no business doing that. And there was even kind of a pushing and shoving situation in the emergency room while they pushed and shoved the coffin back and forth.
Was there any explanation from the federal folks as to why they wanted to take it back to Washington, why it was so important?
Well, they're federal. Got to go to Washington. Got to figure, supposedly they wanted to have the autopsy done in Washington. And then they had to fight about whether it would be at Walter Reed Army Hospital or Bethesda Naval Hospital. And Mrs. Kennedy spoke up and said, well, Jack was in the Navy, so it should go to the Naval Hospital. And, you would think they had more of a plan ahead of time for this kind of situation.
They just came off as being totally unprepared for the whole thing.
Yes.
And from what I understand, when the autopsy was done, it was done by a couple of guys who really had very little experience at this sort of thing.
They were not forensic pathologists. They had never done an autopsy for a criminal case. It's a specialized area. And they didn't have a lot of background information. They cut a tracheotomy hole in Kennedy's throat obliterating what they thought was an entrance wound. So then it became a dispute as to whether there was an entrance wound or next. He had a hole in his throat when they brought him in.
And that was bungled, according to some experts. They didn't do a real good job at being the medical examiners or the forensic pathologists as what needed to be done.
Well, they didn't preserve the crime scene. You always preserve a crime scene, whether it's the crime scene is the person's body or the road. You don't tromp around on the tire tracks and
sure,
that sort of thing.
And now let's go back to the assassination and Lee Harvey Oswald. Has it been proven that he was the one that killed Officer J.D. Tippit?
No. There are different descriptions of the person or persons involved in the Tippit killing. There are disputed facts as to the type of gun used. There are a variance of expended shell casings that ended up in the record, in the evidential record. Some were for an automatic pistol, some were for a revolver. It would suggest that there were maybe two people that shot at Tippit.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And then you wonder, well, why and who are they?
Yeah.
Tippit was about 1.5 miles from his patrol area. And it's still not known why was Tippit even there.
Mm-hmm.
His assignment was elsewhere.
Now, hadn't Lee Harvey Oswald tried to assassinate a general before this, or is that speculation?
At the time, earlier in the spring, there was a shot was taken at a general named William Walker. And he was a controversial figure, a very conservative, right-wing kind of guy. And he was sitting in his study working on his tax return when a bullet broke the window, whistled right by his head, and buried itself in the wall. Later, there was some attention directed at Lee Harvey Oswald as the potential shooter of that bullet. But that's not been proven or established.
Okay. All right. And Lee Harvey Oswald said he was a patsy, didn't he? I remember hearing those words when you see coverage of the assassination.
They would bring him out in the hallway of the police station, and there were reporters there, and reporters would shout questions at him. And he would say, I didn't shoot anybody. I'm just a patsy. And then they would drag him away.
And what about Jack Ruby's involvement in this? Has anything ever been discovered with Jack Ruby being associated with the mafia, the military-industrial complex, with Cuba, anything like that?
There are dozens of books you can read with aspects of that part of the case in them. But Ruby may have had an association with the Chicago mob. Witnesses saw him dressed as an Army colonel. I mean, he was a shady character. That's for sure.
And the cops knew who he was when he was there because
they greet him by name.
He owned a strip club or something like that, didn't he?
In one of the times when the police had Lee Harvey Oswald in the hallway, and one of the officers or the district attorney or somebody was saying that, yes, we have this suspect. He's a communist. He was a member of Oswald was a member of the Fair Play for Cuba committee. And the guy giving the talk, he mischaracterized the name of the organization. Jack Ruby's in the back of the room, and he speaks up and goes, that's the Fair Play for Cuba committee. Jack Ruby knew more than he should have about Lee Harvey Oswald at a time before Oswald was shot, but he was in the custody of the Dallas police.
And you said at the Rotary meeting, Lee Harvey Oswald was no dummy.
No. He was, he had an above average IQ, according to his Marine Corps records. He was selected for Russian language training in California. He had a classified classification because he was a radar operator for the U-2 spy plane. And so he was smart, he was qualified, and had, like I say, special training. So
Yeah,
he was no dummy.
He was trained as a sniper, wasn't he?
No.
Oh, he wasn't. Okay.
No. He was trained as a radar operator.
Oh, is that right?
Mhm.
Okay. And he married a woman from Russia.
He married a woman named Marina, whose grandfather or father was a KGB officer.
Hmm.
And yeah, she was no dummy either.
And you met her at some point.
I met her.
Didn't really have much of a conversation, but you did meet her.
Well, I was able to say, hello, Mrs. Oswald. It's nice to meet you.
And that was about it. Huh?
Yeah, right,
Okay,
right.
all right.
I was, they had a big luncheon for her, and I was in the attendance.
Sure, sure. Now let's move on to the FBI. Now, weren't there some documents or reports that were lost, the files that were lost by the FBI for this whole thing that were supposed to be turned in, or am I just dreaming that?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move along to the Warren Commission. Why did President Johnson get these guys together anyway? What was the purpose of it?
I think the president wanted to control the information so he could control the outcome. So he appointed this blue ribbon panel of august statesmen to come up with some acceptable solution.
Mm-hmm.
What they were concerned about was indications that the Russians or the Cubans were sponsors of Oswald, and that the killing would then get blown into an international incident and a cause for war. And so they wanted, and Johnson specifically told Earl Warren when he recruited him for this assignment, says, I need you to head this panel. We need to head off a nuclear war.
And he thought that's what it would turn out to be.
Well, that's what their concern was, or that's what they told people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, perhaps Johnson just didn't want everybody to know that he was behind it. But he portrayed it to Earl Warren and to the Warren Commission that it was a threat to world peace.
And so the Warren Commission turned a blind eye to a lot of different things. There was a lot of evidence that apparently didn't get presented, and some evidence that did get presented that they didn't pay any attention to. Am I right about that?
Well, I think they selected stuff that fit the theory and stuff that didn't fit the theory.
So you think they had a preconceived notion as to what happened, and they kind of went with that, and that's how it turned out, where there was a single bullet theory and that Lee Harvey Oswald was the only shooter?
Well, I don't think the Warren Commission had a preconceived notion. I mean, they weren't in on it before it happened.
But somebody else or some other group did.
But there may have been people on the Warren Commission, some members of the commission may have known more than others.
Uh-huh.
There may have been participation within the government. But I think the Warren Commission was basically an information control mechanism.
Okay. Well, here's a $64,000 question that you were asked at Rotary, and you know I'm going to ask it. What is your theory as to what happened with JFK? Do you even have a opinion on that?
No, I'm not in a position to say here's what happened. I don't.
Well, it's your opinion. It's just an opinion.
Right now, my leading candidates for the assassination is a kind of a crew of an international crew of professional criminals that was available after World War II and up into the 60s and 70s as assassins for hire. And I think they tapped that talent pool. And by they, I think the killing originated within the United States government and the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, and this came up at the meeting the other day too, that the thought was, and again, this is just another theory, that JFK was ready to pull the plug on the Vietnam War, and the military-industrial complex was not down with that. And so that's why JFK was assassinated. But
that's one reason. Another theory is that he was not on board with invading Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
That within the military-industrial complex, do we want a war with Cuba or do we want a war in Vietnam?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going on in the background also.
Sure. Well, it continues to be quite a thing, and I know we have a new president coming in, Trump, who had said before he was elected in 2016 that he was going to release all the documents on this, but he didn't.
But he didn't.
And I keep wondering why. What does the government have to hide on this whole thing? I think that's what drives people crazy. We'd like to, after 61 years, we'd like to come to some kind of conclusion on this. And you said something that I think was very true at the meeting. And I agree with you, John. And this was kind of the start of us really not believing the government.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of the problems our government is faced with nowadays, such as conspiracy theories and a lack of credibility, began with the failure to solve the Kennedy assassination and tell the American people what happened, who did it, and why. Yeah.
And you said there's so many different theories, and you must have a gazillion different books on different things. One thing I brought up is something that I'd never heard as a theory before, and this was, I think, a year or two ago, that the initial shot might have been done by Oswald, but then the Secret Service car was right behind Kennedy, and a Secret Service agent, when he heard the gunshot, drew out his automatic weapon and accidentally shot Kennedy. And I could see how that would be covered up too, because it would be a big embarrassment to the Secret Service and the government. But there's so much stuff that was released, and wasn't there a lot of stuff that was redacted too, John?
Oh, yeah. I've got a book that I can loan you about the accidental AR-15 shot from the back seat of the car. But that even in my own library, I've got a big collection of, or a big report that was finally disgorged by the government. It was a congressional committee, House Committee on Assassinations in the late 70s, did a report. The CIA got hold of it and just redacted it. It was there's hardly anything in there, and it always made me wonder if the guy acted alone, why is the report so thick and why is it so heavily redacted? But there is still classified information. They still haven't released all the files. President Trump said he was going to do that the last time he was elected, but he didn't. And you have to wonder why or who told him not to. It's just very unsatisfying, and it doesn't build any confidence in our leadership that they're taking care of things.
Exactly. Yeah. I know you're not Nostradamus, but your prediction, do you think in our lifetimes we'll ever find out what actually happened with the assassination of JFK?
Wow, in our lifetime. Who's us?
Who knows when your number's going to be up, right? But I'd say probably in the next 10 to 20 years.
I would like to think so. I would like to think so. Just like this special agent Landis, who a year ago came forward with his story about collecting the bullet out of the back seat of the car.
Yeah.
60 years goes by. You think you know everything there is to know, and then boom, here's a whole new, brand new development. I think it might be another 60 years before they follow up on that new lead, and that's a new lead.
Yeah. I hope they get that figured out real soon.
Well, it means to me that the district attorney of Dallas, Texas, has an open murder case with newly discovered evidence. Should get on it.
Yep. I hope they do.
Yeah.
We got to get her done real soon. Well, I was 5 years old at the time. I don't remember the JFK assassination, but I asked my mom before she passed, I said, do you remember where you were when JFK was assassinated? And she said, Jamie, you were a particularly ornery boy that day, and your dad had come home for lunch, and I needed to go for a walk and get away from you. And I came back, and your father had told me what had happened. And I am fascinated also, being a media person, with the coverage of it. Just this morning, I was watching the NBC coverage of the assassination. I watched the Walter Cronkite coverage of it all the time too. The Dallas TV station WFAA had the couple that hit the ground out there that were witnesses to the whole thing, and
who said the shot came from behind them and right over their heads.
Right, from the fence, the grassy knoll.
I think that guy's name was Arnold.
Something like that.
Or the guy standing next to him was Mr. Arnold.
Yeah,
but yeah.
And they also had the Dallas TV station Zapruder, who did the Zapruder film. And they were saying, we got to get this developed. And it ended up getting sold to Time Life, didn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
That amazes me that some evidence got sold to a private entity.
Yeah.
I can't believe it.
There's a lot of things that's just kind of hard to believe. It's kind of crazy. It really is. But I hope we find out the facts here real soon. I was going to tell you too, I found a JFK channel on YouTube. I don't know if you've ever seen it or not.
Oh boy.
But it's all things JFK. If you go to YouTube, and this morning I was watching some of it, and then there's a brand new thing on YouTube about the JFK assassination. We get alerts. In fact, we were up at 2:30 in the morning watching this, and we just got about 15, 20 minutes into it. It's a 2-hour thing. And it just fascinates me as it does you. And maybe someday I'll get down to Dallas and check out some of the places that you have seen, because it's history.
Well, and when you find yourself in those places that you've read about or seen on TV, it gives you a very eerie feeling and sensation.
And you were asked this at the Rotary meeting. What do you think of the movie JFK?
Oh, it's great. I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, Oliver Stone was criticized because didn't he have a lot of stuff in there that was either not true? I mean, I know there's speculation, and I understand that, but is that not true, or was everything that in there, was that all stuff that was true? I don't know.
What's the old Teddy Roosevelt quote about the man in the arena? You know, the guy who's covered with dust and sweat from the fight. I mean, if you're going to make fun of a guy like Oliver Stone, who undertakes a project like that movie, and then you're going to criticize it, I would say, well, go make your own better movie.
Sure.
But I think what Oliver Stone undertook and presented is well worth the rest of us watching.
Right. Did you see the director's cut? Because that goes on.
Yep.
It's like 3 or 4 hours, something like that. But it was very fascinating.
Well, it's like the director's cut of Apocalypse Now. Mm-hmm. There's reasons you cut things out of an epic like that.
Yeah. Well, John, I told you this before we started the interview. I could talk to you all day about this. This is very fascinating, and I appreciate you taking the time to tell us about it.
Well, thanks for having me, Jamie.
This podcast has also been sponsored by Tony Pesca, Ira Realty. Check her out if you want to buy or sell a home. Talk to Tony. She found the right house for Little Red and myself, and she'll find the right one for you. Give Tony a call at 641-417-8484. Also by Ryan's Tire and Auto in Newton. They always have food trucks in the parking lot there. They not only have the best customers, best prices, best service, but also the best food. So if you're hungry for lunch at some point in the week, no doubt one day or another out of the week, you'll find a food truck at Ryan's Tire and Auto on First Avenue, Newton. But they not only have that, but they have great quality name brand tires, and they'll do a fantastic oil change for you too at Ryan's. Also by Newton Clinic PC, a message to Medicare Advantage patients. If you have any questions regarding participation in Medicare Advantage, please reach out to either the Medicare Advantage plans, and you could also talk to the SHIP folks for resources on this. The phone number to call at Newton Clinic is 641-792-2112, 641-792-2112. And also by Clement Mackey Insurance in Newton. They're sponsoring the Holiday Lights once again at Maytag Park. And on their Facebook page, they ask, are you ready to solve a credit report crime with John Q. Gumshoe? Grab your magnifying glass and click on the link to find out more about crooked credit reports at the Facebook page for Clement Mackey Insurance in Newton. And also by Newton Des Moines East KOA. We're with Dana from Newton Des Moines East KOA. And Dana, I understand you have a new service you're offering.
Yes, we do, Jamie. We are introducing our new Newton KOA Handyman service. Is one of the services that we're adding. We have workers that have worked at our camp every season, and they would like to work for us through the winter. So we came up with they came up with our Newton KOA Handyman service, where they're willing to come to your home, clean out your garage, clean any part of your home that needs cleaning, or your yard, take trash to the dump, do some lawn care and cleanup, basic home repairs. excluding electrical and mechanical stuff that requires a licensed person. We don't do that, but they'll also hang your holiday lights and put up Halloween decorations. And we can also do auto detailing. One of the guys that we have does auto detailing. And even one of our guys is a seamstress. He's great at sewing. So
Wow.
if you need anything sewn, our Clarence can take care of that for you as well.
That's great, man. They sound like a jack of all trades.
That's right.
And master of all, I'm sure.
Exactly. We have Moses, who is great at tree work and brush work, so he can take down smaller trees. If it requires a lift, he'll let you know what he can and can't do on the tree end of things. And then Clarence, of course, he's a well-rounded, and Jeff does the auto detailing, and so does Clarence. We call it from mess to masterpiece. We can make it happen.
Well, that sounds fantastic. Yeah, you have a lot of stuff going on there, and some people who can do things that you, I think, had mentioned to me before about Christmas lights. If you're a person that doesn't want to get up on the ladder and whatnot and worry about heights and things like that, but yet want to be very festive for Christmas, the handyman service will take care of that for you too, right?
It's perfect for that. For example, my husband just rolls his eyes when I say we should put Christmas lights up this year, because that is not something that he relishes doing. And but I like having Christmas lights up. So for our reasonable rates, it's a great deal to have our guys come out and put your Christmas lights up.
All right, fantastic. Anything else you want to add?
No, most of the work can be done on Wednesdays or Thursdays, so we can schedule it. We do have a 2-hour minimum for 2 guys required, and we are discounting our rate for our first 10 jobs that we take. So if you're hearing about this and you need your garage cleaned out so you can park your car in the garage this winter, please give us a call at 641-792-2428.
Give us that number one more time.
641-792-2428.
Thanks, Dana. Until next time, grrr out is out. See ya.